Welcome to Ren's Philanthropic Insights video podcast series designed to help financial advisors and donors make the most of their charitable giving. I'm Kim Ledger, Ren's SVP of Complex Assets. We have a really special guest today, someone who is a leader in the charitable giving space with an amazing story to share. Jen Risher is the author of We Need to Talk, a memoir about wealth, and the co-founder of the #HalfMyDAF campaign. As you'll learn in her book, which I found fascinating, Jen has had a complicated relationship with wealth and the challenges it brings. She has figured out how to really make a positive impact through charitable giving, which we're going to talk about today. Jen, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kim. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your journey to bring you to where you are today.
Yeah, I guess my journey started with getting very, very lucky. When I was 25, I joined Microsoft. I was a recruiter there. And on my first day at orientation, I met my husband. I also got stock that was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. David's stock was worth millions. So we were very, very fortunate. We were still working at Microsoft. We were married and expecting our first child when my husband decided he wanted to take a job at a small startup called Amazon.com.
You talked about that in the book. I thought that was having dinner with Jeff and McKinsey. I thought that was, taking that risk to go do that. That was, again, I loved it. I love the stories. Yeah.
It really was a risk at the time. And I remember David was called into Bill Gates' office and Bill was like, this is the stupidest decision you've ever made. Why are you going to work at this small, they were out of their garage. It was a small startup. They were selling books on the internet.
Yes.
But he was the 37th employee. And very quickly after he started, the company went public. And we were in our early 30s, and suddenly we really had more money than we could wrap our heads around, which of course is amazing, and it's sort of this dream come true, this fantasy come true, and yet there was another piece of it that I hadn't expected and was very surprising. All the kind of emotional the feelings that came up for me around money, and my relationship with my parents and my brother and my friends, and I started to look around for what book can I read on how to deal with all this that's coming up? And there was really no book. So I ended up writing a book about my story. And really my goal is to help acknowledge the emotional complexity of money. We all have a money story. We all have a relationship with money that we learned during our childhood. And so really looking at that and looking at how it's affecting us today, because we also all have our limitations and our biases, and so by writing my story, my goal really is to help others understand their own stories and kind of ultimately move out of hiding money or feeling ashamed or guilty or keeping it quiet and into more of a sense of joy and also of purpose with their money.
One of the comments that you made too, or the things that you talked about in the book was, how to navigate that with friends as you began to, as the wealth increased and they were saying pretty normal, and how you had to navigate that. And I thought you showed great sensitivity and wisdom as you navigated through that. So I think your book is going to be a huge help to a lot of people.
Thank you. It really has found an audience, which is very rewarding, and it feels like, it helps other people to feel like they're not alone in some of the issues that come up.
One of the things that I know we wanted to talk about today was #HalfMyDAF campaign. I want to talk about that, but one of the things that I noticed is that was started in May of 2020. So there's a little event happening in the world at that time. Did that play a role in it?
Absolutely. It was an emotional response to COVID. This was the moment, think back, and everyone was sheltering in place, and there was so much uncertainty and just so much need in the world. And my husband and I were sitting in our backyard, he was running a nonprofit himself, so he could feel how funding was drying up, and he couldn't hold his he'd been around for 10 years with World Reader, and he couldn't hold his dinner that he was planning. Anyway, our hearts were going out to nonprofits and to really all the people in need. And we initially, I mean, we were giving to places that we already supported, kind of doubling down on those gifts or accelerating a 3-year gift, but we felt like we wanted to do more. And it was just a brainstorm of like, what can we do? And we were highly aware of the money that was sitting in donor advised funds at the time, because it was a large amount, $120 billion. And we're looking at that money, it's like, wow, maybe we could help activate that. So we ended up putting up $1 million of our own and saying this money is to incent and inspire others to give. So it's a form of matching grants. And then we created a website. We came up with the idea of half my DAF. We got people to commit to spending down half their DAF by the end of September. So they had 5 months. And anywhere they gave, they could give anywhere they wanted. We just wanted to promote giving, as long as it didn't promote hate speech or gun violence. We were fine with wherever anyone wanted to give. We just wanted to get that action happening. And so, yeah, we launched in the beginning of May. And by end of September, we had moved $8.6 million. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, that's very fantastic. I remember that time was in the industry, we have what we call a giving season, which tends to be the last month of the year, or the last 2 months of the year, but really that last month of the year. And during that period of time, we saw the same thing, Jen. It was people were giving, and that's what we found, that with those dollars set aside, they were using it. And so and I think even if they didn't apply for it through your program necessarily, I think that message was getting across, and people were using their donor advised funds as they're intended. So,
yes.
Yeah, it was exciting to see. We were incredibly busy. People talked about not being busy. We did not understand that.
I love that. Yeah. And in fact, one of the things we did with Half My DAF is we focused on the first 3 quarters, because we know that people are accustomed to giving at the end of the year. So that's why we wanted to kind of accelerate that and get it started earlier in the year. So that's why we kind of had the cutoff at the end of the 3rd quarter. And it's really rewarding and nice to know that people were activated to make those gifts at the end of 2020.
Well, and as you think about that too, at the time, the market was down. And we didn't know what the future held.
No.
And there was a lot of uncertainty, and there was a lot of fear during that time. And you wanted to kind of hang on to what you had. But again, that's what donor advised funds are for those times of crisis, in addition to other things, but especially valuable during that time when not maybe necessarily wanting to pull out of your own investments that fund your lifestyle, but to be able to pull from that and make those gifts at that time. It was powerful.
Yes. Yeah. No, and we wanted to, inspire that giving early and get it to happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you focused on donor advised fund. Why donor advised funds over, say, other types of giving vehicles like charitable trusts?
We've been using donor advised funds, so we were familiar with them, and we had seen that big number and kind of felt like, wow, because it was such a time of uncertainty, it was the time to activate that money during COVID, and so we wanted to raise awareness for people to kind of think about that money, since it was tax-free money for them, and it was already kind of earmarked for charitable giving. So we just thought it was such it was low-hanging fruit, an easy way for, I think, people to give. And it was something we were familiar with. We had opened a DAF many, many years ago, and I'm a fan of the tool. It's an excellent way to kind of move money. It helps you organize. It gives you that tax break up front, so you can then give out over time, and it makes it very easy. So it's an amazing tool. It just has to be used.
Yes, we agree. One of the things you talked about in the book too was not knowing where to gift that money, and having to do the research, and then getting involved with women moving millions, and was that involvement was a lot of that born from that feeling, getting involved with women moving millions, but learning about that as well.
My involvement really came from, having written the book. I spent a lot of time, many years, working through, and a lot of it was therapy, working through the feelings that around money. Because it's kind of the last taboo. I mean, it's like something we don't talk about, but I do believe the more we could talk about it, the more we kind of take the power out of it and own the power ourselves. And when we don't talk about something, it kind of creates shame around it. And you kind of, you make assumptions rather than actually talking to family members or talk. So when I had gone through the process of really examining my own money story and then putting it out in the world, I was like, okay, wow. And then I really looked at our money in a different way. And I thought, what am I doing with this money? How am I using it? And what's my purpose with it? And so when I was out talking to people about wealth and their emotional reactions to it, I also looked at our money in a different way. And I, for the first time, became an investor. I started to invest in women of color. I realized that I could use my money to really shift the power dynamics there, and I'm all about equity, economic, racial, and gender equity. So I've been really focused on kind of how do I use my money, my philanthropic dollars, but also, the money I have in my portfolio in different ways. So it was really an activator for me. And ultimately, I hope that my book really will help people move into this sense of purpose and action, because it's a very powerful place to be. And I think especially as women, we need to recognize our own power, because we have a lot of it, and our money is power, and how we use our money is powerful. So I've lost your question and all that because it got me excited. But how did I get involved in these things?
Yeah, but I know, and there's so many questions going through my head as you're talking too. There's like, I'm getting excited about it too. But yeah, we've seen an increase in the impact investing and utilizing DAFs for a portion for people will set aside. They may have multiple tools, and they'll use their DAF maybe to invest in impact, but they'll have a private foundation or a charitable trust where, or they'll have another DAF that's making grants, and so they'll allocate certain dollars towards that too. So we've seen a huge rise in that too, and that's always exciting. And you see the gender equality and climate tend to be some of the larger or social issues as well. So
it's exciting because I think the DAF is such a flexible tool. I mean, there's so many ways you can activate your money in there. So that's why I hate to see and hate the fact that now there's like $229 billion sitting into the amount is growing, and I really am an advocate for activating that money, whether it's moving it out and putting it to work, or investing or doing loans. You can do a lot with the money that's in there.
We are seeing more recoverable grants, to your point, as well, doing the loans. And it's to your point, it's a very, very flexible vehicle. So you've talked about that you have a DAF. What are some of the charities that you like to fund? You've talked about how you like to invest. What are some of the charities that you like to fund?
Well, you mentioned Women Moving Millions. I'm a huge advocate for gender equity, and so I'm part of several networks, Women Moving Millions, Women Donors Network, Solidaire, and all of those organizations I help. They do a lot of incredible work. So I like to fund funds and kind of relinquish the control there and let other people who are closest to the problem kind of use the money in the way that they think is the most powerful. I'm a huge advocate of that. My husband had a nonprofit that he started 15 years ago called World Reader, getting books into the hands of kids in the developing world. And he was in Ghana and Kenya and India, and he got over 20 million kids reading through his program. So we were a huge supporter of that. And now, like, my focus being, equity, gender, racial, and economic equity, I really kind of focus on organizations that are in that space. But it starts, everyone's on a different place in their philanthropic journey. I want to say, one of the things I think is important is for people to kind of think about what's most important to them, because if they're in touch with what they care about, they're likely going to be more involved, more engaged, and give bigger. So I think it's really important to start there, because I mean, one of the places I gave one of my first gifts was to the mothers group I was part of when
Yeah.
I had our first daughter, and I still give to them, and I have a relationship with them, and it feels like a partnership. And now, not only do I give to that organization, there's a Families of Color organization in Seattle that has, it's focused on families of color. So I give there as well. So I like to kind of expand my giving, but I notice for myself that it starts with something local, something I'm connected to.
And that makes a lot of sense to me. Um, Again, based on what I read in the book too, that you get the mothers group, I know is really important to you. It was sprinkled throughout the book. That was it's great. Then is measuring impact important to you, or if it is, how do you think about that when you're utilizing a DAF?
I think, unfortunately, that philanthropy has kind of gotten in its own way by becoming too strategic, too focused on impact, focused on measurements and data, because it scares people. And who doesn't? I mean, effective altruism is my biggest enemy, because it's like, of course, you want most of your dollars to have impact. That's obvious, but it gets people scared, and there's a lot of fear of getting it wrong. And I don't believe, if you're giving money to an organization where people are dedicating their lives to solving a problem or helping people in need, you are not going to get it wrong. Making that gift is the biggest thing you can do, and it's trusting that people who are in that space are going to do the right thing. So I really am a believer in trust-based giving, in recognizing that I don't know everything there is to know about, like, solving world hunger or helping people read I mean, I look to the people who really have the experience to make the right decisions. And so for me, impact is giving, creating relationship, building partnership, knowing and trusting the people that are closest to the work and to the problems being solved.
I love that. I love that answer. And I'm sure a lot of charities out there are loving your answer as well. That's great. Is there anything exciting that's going on right now with Half My DAF?
Well, yes. I mean, we are now, I mean, so after that first year, that it was like a one-off thing for us. Like, it was like, what
Okay.
can we do in a time of COVID? But it was really successful, and it really got, I mean, donors and nonprofits alike really found the value there. I mean, donors feel like, wow, it can leverage my money. And wow, which of my nonprofits are going to get matches? It was very exciting. And so people would say, well, when you do this next year, so we hadn't really planned to, but we felt like it had made an impact. And so we did it a second year. And actually, the second year was really amazing, because we have two daughters, and they both got involved because they were home sheltering in place with us, and we needed someone to do the data entry, and so they were forced involved. But it really got them looking at all the nonprofits that were being supported and learning about this space. And so for the holidays, they gave us the best gift we could have ever imagined. They both came to us and said, we want to put money towards Half My DAF, towards the match. And our older daughter said, I want to give this money, but I want it to go to racial justice. And our younger daughter said, I have this money, and I want it to go to climate and environment. So the
Love it.
next year, we had partners as well who joined us in that matching pool. And so the second year, we didn't only do a general fund, give wherever you want. We continued to do that, but we added buckets kind of that showed up with our values, with education in underserved communities, and reproductive health, and racial justice, and climate and environment. And so that second year was very exciting, because our daughters really showed up, and it was sort of a family effort.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So you've mirrored that with your kids. I love that. I was going to ask you how your kids were involved in that. So you've answered that question. That's very cool.
Yes.
How
So
old are your girls now?
they are 25 and 27. Yes. So
Wow.
they're out in the world working, and yeah, they're doing great, and they're continuing to. I mean, it's exciting to watch them grow, and also watch them kind of find their own passions in terms of
Yeah.
giving and what they want to do there. And they're still big supporters of Half My DAF. So you asked what was kind of going on now. So we're in year 5. And it's exciting to see that every year since we started, we've moved more money through Half My Daff. And this past, 3 months, we've moved more than we've ever moved, $13 million. So it's very
Oh,
exciting.
congratulations.
Yes, it's thrilling, and we now are kind of in the final stretch of this year. We will give out our matches at the end of September, and we have a $1.1 million to give in matching funds. And we just find that inspiration and then the deadline and the dates gets people. I mean, there's a lot of like, well, I'll get to it later, or there's nothing really lighting a fire under people to do it now. And so with this sense of urgency, that kind of happens. So that's always exciting to feel like, okay, we're really making a difference here.
That's awesome. Well, I was going to ask you what excites you about philanthropy today, but you may have just already answered that. Are there other
But
things that excite you about philanthropy?
I do like the direction it's moving, and I really admire Mackenzie Scott, who's really stepped up, moved big, moved quickly, and done it with sort of trust-based giving.
Yeah.
And Melinda French Gates, also incredible. I love those two, and I think they've been powerful leaders in the space. And I do like the direction it's going with kind of this less kind of focus on rigor and strategy and all this, and more trust, and the fact that so many nonprofits are doing such incredible work, and trusting that the people working out there and moving that money.
That's right. Women moving millions. I love it.
Exactly.
Well, Jen, thanks so much for joining us today. Really enjoyed the conversation. And to our listeners, I hope you'll get Jen's book. You'll enjoy it. It really relates to a lot of different people all across all different lines. So I hope you'll pick that up as well.
Thank you.
So, yeah, yeah. Thanks so much. And thanks for all you do for philanthropy.
Thank you, Kim. It's nice
All
talking with
right.
you.
You as well.